Welcome back. It's time for part three of our NZ Set review series. I'm joined again today with Nick, like the first two episodes,
I see,
and
yes.
we are going to get right into the set. This is the first of the sort of increased card counts sets that we've done. As NZ started, it was just like two kind of 25 card sets, and then we shifted into alternating between a small set and a large set every 6 months. So in June we do a small set, Christmas time we do a large set. So this is the first of the big sets. So this is a full 50 card set as opposed to 25. So because of that, we're going to split this video in half just so it's not 2 hours long. So today we're going to go ahead and get through the styled cards in the set, and then we'll cover freestyle and the personalities from the set in part two. Getting right into the first of the cards here is Black Negation. There's a whole cycle of these, one in every color. This one is stop the effects of a combat card, use when needed, so styled sphere. But then it also has, if you declare to Tokawaza, your opponent shuffles their hand into their life deck and draws the same number of cards, -1. Limit 1 per deck, remove from game after use. So, like Sphere, it just stops a combat card whenever you need it to. However, because it's styled, if you declare to Tokawaza, you get some effect that kind of is the thing the color does already. So this one, just messing with your opponent's hand, is very, very strong. You can take a really well sculpted hand and just turn it into just junk. Of course, because of that, all of these are limit 1 and are all, of course, removed from game after use. Just kind of get one use of these guys, but they are all very impactful anytime you get them to land.
Yeah, and the big key with the negation cycle is just going to be if you're playing this color, put this card in your deck. Don't really ask any questions.
Yeah.
Alright, the next black card is Black Vegeta's Gallic Gun. It has Transform, which is a reminder Transform means you can play it from your discard pile by discarding a black energy combat. It's energy for 5 life cards. You may discard the top 4 cards of your life deck to discard up to 2 non-combats or allies in play, remove from the game after use. So this card is quite powerful. It is obviously non-combat. Ally hate is always very useful. 4 cards is a lot, but you'll find yourself doing it a good percentage of the time because answering your opponent's cards in play is very powerful effects. Also, with it being a black energy combat with Transform, it plays well with the other, the black energy combat kind of style. And, this is a card that you're going to want some number of copies of in almost every black deck. And if you're a hybrid deck or if you're a deck that is energy focused, you're going to want 3 copies every time of course, if you're Vegeta.
Yeah, this card is just great. You need to have 2, 3, 4 copies of this any chance you get. Black plays pretty well with its hybrid attack styles, better than some other colors do, and it fits great into those decks. A fun little bit of, aesthetic trivia here is each of the following black cards in this set, we used impact frames for all of them, so they're the kind of inverted black and white art that are like sort of a frame long when like a light flashes. It just made a nice sort of suite of cool black art. As you can see, like I said, we have Black Mutilation here. Focused physical attack, doing 3 life cards of damage. If successful, discard 2 cards from your opponent's hand. If stopped, discard a card from your hand. So, physical for some life cards is good. It's a bunch of extra life cards with Black Trump Saga. But if successful, discarding 2 cards from your opponent's hand is stronger than just about every other black discard card you've got, other than sort of, drop kick or I guess Chaos Detonation, but this one being free makes that pretty nice. However, it is a little bit risky because you might have to discard one of your own cards if your opponent can stop it, but it is focused though, so it's a little bit harder to do that. So it's just sort of a risk if it's worth it to you to try to get the extra card out of your opponent's hand, or risk it to lose one of your own. Pairs nice with some of the other masteries that exist, and you can kind of combo this into discarding 2 cards in their hand and then another one with something like Black Eradication or something like that. And you can kind of get this to really pile up.
Yeah, what I've seen with this card a lot is waiting for it to be the last attack you throw, and you sniping their last two cards with it, and if they stop it, you don't have any cards left to discard, so it's no loss. And by that point, it being focused and being probably your second or third attack makes it a little harder to stop. So there's a lot of times where this card will feel very powerful. The next card is Black Aura Eruption. It, of course, has Transform, stops a physical or energy attack. If you declare Tokawaza, remove the bottom 5 cards of your opponent's discard pile from the game, and your MP gains 5 stages. So this is one of the most powerful black cards we've printed. It's definitely a card you're going to want to play as a 3 of in almost every deck. Um, it fits well in every one of the black masteries. The remove the bottom 5 cards of your opponent's discard pile from the game obviously would trigger Black Calamity, or also just discard pile removal is very strong in this game. Your main personality gaining 5 power stages is always useful too. If you're trading blows back and forth, this can help you kind of get the edge. It can also just be a card you play to give yourself some stages to fire off, a Chaos Dead or Gallic Gun or something like that. So this card is the absolute black staple, and you should play it in all of your decks.
Yeah, I don't think anyone that can read cards, new to NZ or not, can read this card and be like, I don't know about this one. It's just obviously great. I would argue that it's like probably in the top, if not the best, like top 3 like NZ cards we've ever made. So I think this one is just obviously super good and should be ran. Black Imposing Drill. Another card with Transform. Our first drill that has that. If you declare to Tokawaza, your opponent plays with their hand revealed. When you use an effect to discard cards from your opponent's hand during combat, they're removed from the game instead of discarded. Those two things just obviously pair really well together. Using discard effects while you know what cards are in your opponent's hand means that you get to use discard effects when it is strongest. You're not kind of discarding blind. You kind of know exactly what what opportunities you have to hit. This one having Transform and being a non-combat is a little bit unique compared to the others. Transform, the way that it works is you can't change the timing in which you could play a card. You still have to play it in the same time you could. So during your non-combat step, you could pitch a black non-combat card to play this one from your discard pile. But the effects just kind of pair really nice together. You already discard a bunch of your opponent's cards. Now they're removed from game, which is even worse. And you know what cards you have the opportunity to discard. A very strong card.
Yep. As we've seen with blue middle drill and cards like that, any kind of defensive or control deck very much values seeing their opponent's hand. So, if you are a defensive or controlling black deck, this is definitely a card that you're going to consider. Okay, so now we're moving on to blue. The first card is the blue negation. As we said earlier, the negation should just fit in every deck. The blue one is stops the effects of any combat card. Use when needed. If you declare Tokawaza, lower your opponent's anger 2 levels, and search your discard pile for a non-combat and place it into play. Limit 1, remove from game. So, obviously you can tell pretty quickly how powerful an effect this is. Lower your opponent's anger 2 is, kind of the blue thing, lowering your opponent's anger. And then the search for a non-combat and place it into play. Even if you're not playing a lot of non-combats, every deck has Fatherly Advice, every deck has Expectant Trunks. Like, being able to reuse any of those kind of cards is so powerful. If you are on a true blue deck and you're playing things like, Blue Biting Drill and Spec Ops Drill and things like that, it can get back any of those. So it's got a lot of versatility. Obviously, the card is insanely powerful and, auto-include in any blue deck.
Yeah, I don't think there's another thing left to say about this one. It's just good. Worst case scenario, you almost always have a Victril even to get back. So it happens a lot that you can recover something with this card. Then Blue Pressure Point is a blue card with Transform. It's a focused physical attack doing +2 power stages of damage. If you have lowered your opponent's anger this combat, gain 3 power stages and discard an opponent's non-combat card in play. Remove from the game after use. As we've talked about with some of the blue cards like in the last set too, dealing with some of your opponent's non-combat cards is good. Having other options than like just sort of blue betrayal or like blue wrist block is welcome in the color. It being focused makes it a little harder to block. The way that Transform was kind of implemented, especially in the first sort of sets where it was used on cards that were like situationally good. And it was, instead of having to hold a card like this forever, to try to like line up the combo, you could kind of set it up a little bit more effectively. So this one you can leave it in your discard pile, wait till you found a combat where you've lowered your opponent's anger, then you can use this to pull off the effect. You don't have to just hold it to wait for that moment. A little bit of lowering, or a little bit of getting stages is always welcome too. Like I mentioned in the last video, blue plays hybrid pretty well too. So having a couple extra stages for a future physical or a future energy after a physical or something like that is always good.
Yeah, and anytime you can discard a block to get another attack in is pretty useful. So, if your
Yeah,
opponent's playing an energy deck or something and your physical blocks aren't as great, then you can turn it into this. That feels pretty good.
sure does.
The next card is Blue Energy Throw. This is an energy combat with Transform. It's an energy attack doing 3 life cards of damage. If successful, new to player Tokawaza, raise or lower your opponent's MP 1 level, removed from game after use. So these effects that raise your opponent's level, raise or lower your opponent's level, is obviously good against MPPV, and just the opposite, it's good against Camp 1 decks. So any kind of control deck, any kind of ball deck, or anything like that. It having transforms means, kind of like the last card where you can leave it in the discard pile until the time comes when you are confident you can get it through, and then you throw it and you get it through, and you'll raise them a level or lower them a level, make them discard all their drills, lose all their effects like that in play, get them off of maybe their really strong level 1 or really strong level 2, get away from the G to settle down, or there's a lot of things you can do with this kind of effect. Its versatility is incredibly strong. It is an if successful, which does make it a little more difficult. You got to line it up right, but when you can line it up right, most decks do not like either want to be leveled or don't want to be leveled, so you can just take them the opposite way of whichever they prefer.
Yeah, if you pull this off, there's a lot of disrupting plans that can come from it, and having transform gives you a really good opportunity to know when the right time to do that is. One thing I didn't mention at the very beginning of the video, I apologize. This set is called Transformation and was the introduction of this transform mechanic. So as you can see, it is featured a lot in this set, and was sort of its implementation into our design space. Blue Arrogant Grab, another one with Transform. Focus physical, doing +3 power stages of damage. If successful, shuffle a Dragon Ball and play back into its owner's life deck. If your opponent's anger is at 0 or 1, this card can stop a physical attack instead, removed from the game after use. So you got a physical attack. It's also a block most of the time, because blue kind of tends to be pretty good at keeping your opponent at 0 or 1 in anger. And then you can have a little bit of control over a ball being on the table from your opponent. Say they were trying to, have a ball victory or something like that. Setting them back a turn on that is good. Or even just putting one of your own back into your deck to protect it, or to be able to pull it back out to use it again. There's just opportunities you can have with that. It's not the most uh, immediately impactful effect, because there's plenty of times where it's just like no Dragon Ball present and nothing to do with that. But if you're in a situation where you think that Dragon Balls might be relevant, it's kind of worth playing this. And having transform means you can leave it in your discard pile until it is time to use that part of the effect and pull it out when you need it.
Yeah, what Tom has shown us so far is that transform blocks are incredibly powerful effects, and this card just being a generic physical, it's also a physical combat. So if you absolutely need to, you just leave this setting in your discard pile until maybe you do have to cash in one of your attacks in order to get a good block off. So that's a strong effect, and it's a card you should always consider. But just again, transform blocks are very powerful.
Yeah, not having to hold a block feels pretty good.
The next card is Blue Serenity Drill. This is another non-combat with Transform. Your blue style attacks gain, if successful, lower your opponent's anger 1. Prevent X cards of damage from your opponent's attacks, where X is 4 minus your opponent's anger, and this is limit 1 per deck. One thing we didn't mention with the previous card that we should is because these cards do have Transform, if they are discarded or removed from play, they are removed from the game. Uh,
Oh, good point.
but anyway, your blue style attacks, lowering your opponent's anger is great. Obviously, blue wants to keep your opponent's anger down most of the time, and there's a lot of effects like biting drill and spec ops drill, which care about the actual act of lowering your opponent's anger. So that giving it to all your blue style attacks is really great. You know, you trigger them once when you throw the attack. Once again, it's successful, very strong. Prevent the life cards of damage from your opponent's attacks. Now, note it doesn't prevent focused, which can be answered, in other ways. But just your opponent throwing a generic energy for 5 life cards. If they don't have any anger, it's gonna do 1. And so that's obviously a really strong effect. And this is a very powerful prevention drill, and it's something that most control decks should consider playing.
Yeah, if you're going to play any kind of blue deck that wants to stick around a while, wants to camp, this is a card you should definitely be using. The blue cards that most of them just sort of natively lower anger without even trying to like put that into your deck as a thing you're doing. It's just on most of the cards. So it's really easy to get this to trigger for their full value. Then we get into Namekian. We have Namekian Negation. Stops the effects of any combat card used when needed. If you declare a Tokuwaza, shuffle up to 5 cards in your discard pile back into your life deck. Then look at and rearrange the top 6 cards of your life deck in any order. Limit 1 per deck, RFG. So, like we said with the other two, this one is just good. It works well with the things the color already wants to do. Putting cards back in its deck is a very Namekian thing. Shuffling the deck is also pretty good, especially with some of the later masteries that have been made. We've talked a lot about Namekian Tactical Mastery, giving you access to the top card of your deck. This lets you shuffle your deck, which changes the order of cards, and then you change the top 6 too, so you can make sure that, if you played this in that deck, like the top card of your deck is the most impactful it could be. It also helps you set endurance towards the top. It helps you set your next hand up really well. There's just a lot of really powerful things that this one does. As with the other two and everyone you will see after this, play it. Even if you don't play other copies of Sphere, play this card.
Yeah, absolute slam dunk card, as all indications are. Yeah, nothing really to add about this. All right, the next card is Namekian Pointed Blast. This is an energy combat with Transform. It has Endurance 3, which of course is a very Namekian thing to have. It's an energy attack for 3 cards. Discard up to 1 non-combat in play. If your main personality's highest power rating is below 500,000, this attack deals 6 life cards and discards up to 2 non-combats instead. Remove from the game after use. So any Namekian energy deck is going to want this card, even if you are, stronger, even if you have a higher power level. But a lot of the Namekians are kind of lower power levels. You look at, Dende and Kami and Nail and all those kind of guys who are going to get the max value from this card. Energy for 6, discard 2 non-combats is incredible. The ability to have transform means if you have an energy block in your hand that you're not going to be able to get value from, you can always use this to get another attack off. This is a card that I play even in my decks that have stronger MPs. Somebody like Cell still sees value from this card because discarding non-combats is always super useful. Um, it's stronger than it looks on its face value for sure. And like I said, if you're definitely under the 500,000, you want to be playing max copies of this card.
Yeah, it's just it's good all the time. Even better if you're one of the weaker cards. The Saiyan Saga Piccolo High Tech sees a bunch of play still, and this is obviously super good in that. Just useful all the time. Endurance 3 is always good. Transform makes this a very powerful card. You can use it when it's the best time to get rid of non-combats. And that's one of the things that just sort of is consistent with Transform across the board is if when you hit them, one of the things that we do is sort of like an etiquette thing is most people will turn them kind of sideways in the discard pile so you know that they're there. Because it's one of the things your opponent has to really be aware of the fact that because this card exists at any time if they play a non-combat and this is in the discard pile, I can just pull it back and get rid of the non-combats. That really changes the way you have to evaluate what cards are safe and when. You really have to be aware of what cards are in your opponent's discard pile and how quickly they can impact you. It's not just something where they have to go, tutor a card out of the discard pile with some other card effect like you would have kind of had to do in the past. Now it's kind of immediately on demand, available to you. That takes us then into Namekian Crash. This one has Endurance 3 as well, but doesn't have Transform. It's a physical attack doing +3 power stages of damage. It has Empower 4, so you can make this real big if you need it to. But if you need the rest of the effect, you can choose up to 2 cards in your discard pile, shuffle them back into your life deck. If you have shuffled cards into your life deck earlier this combat, you may place one of the chosen cards into your hand, removed from the game after use. So, we just talked about the Namekian negation. There are plenty of Namekian cards that put cards back in the deck, and plenty of them that do so shuffle. So it's pretty easy to get this to line up. Worst case scenario, it's just a good attack. Uh, it's just a powerful attack if you empower it. Even slightly worse, slightly better scenario, you get to put a couple cards back in your deck. In best case, you just get to tutor one of them into your hand to really extend your turn out, keeping with the style of Namekian having good meaty hand size. So it's just a very effective card.
Yeah, and note that it doesn't say Namekian cards from your discard pile, so you can choose anything. You can go get a Confro or Stare Down or something like that, or a block, or whatever you're looking for at the time. The reason why this card has Empower 4, I would assume, is just because of how powerful that secondary effect is. They got to give you a reason to offset the power, but yeah, this card is absolutely great.
Yeah, it's very rare that the Empower will be the card effect you actually use. It will much more often be go get something to put in your hand.
The next card is Namekian Tribal Honor. This is a combat. It's Namekian Heritage only. If there are only Namekian style cards in your discard pile, then for the remainder of combat, your Namekian style attacks deal +2 life cards, and your energy attack costs 1 less to perform to a minimum of 0. So this card has obvious synergy with the Boo Saga Mastery that removes all Namekian style cards from your discard pile. It is pretty hard to use in other masteries because every deck is going to be playing a fair number of freestyle cards. Uh, but Namekian is good at getting a lot of cards in their hand and throwing a lot of attacks, but the attacks are sometimes underwhelming. So this being able to power up what your Namekian style attacks do is very useful. And obviously making energy attacks cost less is always a benefit, especially when it's to a minimum of 0.
Yeah, like Nick said, this is a card that is hard to find like a real home for. Um, Outside of the Busaka one, it does work pretty well there, but um, outside of that, it is tough to find like an exact place for this. But if you are playing a Namekian deck that is doing a good job of like selectively shuffling cards back into your deck, and the deck is pretty Namekian focused, it is much more possible in this like color and that kind of deck style than in a lot of others for your discard pile to be only Namekian. So there are times where this does just turn on, and then having all your attacks do a bunch of extra damage and cost less to perform is a welcome thing. Weak cards hit for low numbers, so making them do more is good. It's definitely takes a very dedicated list though to bring full effectiveness of this card. Namekian Frustration Drill is a little bit more accessible. It has resist, which we'll talk about in just a second. Once per combat, after taking damage from an attack, shuffle the top 2 cards of your discard pile into your life deck and gain 3 power stages. You do not have to remove your Namekian style cards from the game when you use their endurance. So, Namekian has a bunch of endurance. That's good. There are even Namekian cards that give your cards endurance. Not having to remove them is awesome. Getting some cards back into your deck, great. It shuffles your deck, which is good, which couples well with the other cards we've already looked at, with like Crash and yeah, so that works well there. Getting some stages is good, and then resist. So resist is a keyword that was introduced a couple sets after this one and was added kind of retroactively to this one as a slight buff to it. The way that resist works is when a card enters play with resist on it, it comes into play with what's called a resist counter. The first time that this card would leave play because of one of your opponent's effects, it removes the resist counter instead. You can't stack those. You can't have more than one counter. You either have it or you don't. But it basically means you have to get rid of this card twice for it to go away. And that keyword exists to keep cards that need to stay in play to be effective. Like they need to stay in play for a while to be effective. So that just helps this card stick around just a little bit more and get its incremental value over time.
Yeah, obviously you're going to need this card in play for a couple of combats to get the maximum amount of value, but any kind of Namekian deck that is, playing the standard Namekian package with a lot of endurance and a lot of attacks. Shuffling cards back in is definitely a very Namekian thing. Leaving the cards in your discard pile when you use endurance in order to get them shuffled back in is obviously very valuable. This card I've been pretty impressed with overall. It definitely doesn't seem super overwhelming when you read it, but the resist helps it stay around, and usually you're going to get 2 or 3 combats worth out of this card, and it's gonna more than make up for its value. The cost is definitely worth the value. Okay, so we're moving to orange, and this is the orange negation. It stops the effects of any combat card used when needed. If you're declared Tokuwaza, arrange your main personality's highest power stage and search your life deck for an orange style drill and place it into play. So obviously this is orange thing. Orange is the drill color. Everybody knows that. Powering up to full is beneficial in basically every deck that's not an ally deck. You're gonna want be happy with that effect. Um, so raising yourself to full give you more stages to fight physical or more stages to use your energies, and getting a drill that comes into play immediately. Obviously this card is very strong. Put this card in your deck.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of a running joke at this point. It's got to be at least. Uh, the negation cards need no introduction. They're a sphere, they're styled, that's good. They do something even better than a sphere. Sphere was already good. Play this card. There are people who don't use RNZ cards in the league. Fan cards always have some stigma to them, and some people just don't really want to mess with it. But even those people play a negation. Just do it. Orange Right Blast is a orange energy attack with transform. Focused attack doing 5 life cards of damage. Discard an opponent's ally in play. That's a secondary. If successful, search your life deck for a drill and set it aside. Place the chosen drill into play at the end of combat. Remove from the game after use. So, we talked about this before with set 1 and 2. Just kind of getting that whole like drills waiting to come into play and coming in later effects are a thing that we've kind of leaned into with orange. It doesn't have to be an orange drill, so you can grab things like we said before with like quickness drill or something like that are a little safer to bring in late. It does 5 life, which is enough. It's focused and does 5 life, which is enough to capture a ball if they don't hit any endurance, which is always good. That's kind of like the sweet spot for damage. And just has a secondary. Removing an ally is good too. Transform means that this is effective basically every time you use it. So this card's awesome. If you're playing Orange Energy, I think you should be playing this card.
Yeah, any kind of discard effect, or this is an ally specifically that you can transform and use, whenever it comes up, it's very valuable. Just being able to knock out an ally at any point in time, and as we've said in previous videos, focused energy attacks are always really good because just a lot of people don't play energy attacks, or energy blocks. So yeah, this card is quite powerful, and yeah, if you're playing orange energy, you're gonna want this card. The next card is Orange Ginyu Force Flash. It is an energy combat with Transform. So it is a focused energy attack that does X life cards, where X is 2 times the number of allies you have in play. If the Ginyu Force is your MP, this attack costs 0, and then if successful, you can search your deck or discard pile for an ally and put it into play at 3 above, and it of course removes after use. So, it's pretty obvious what this card is trying to do. It is a card directly printed to help the Ginyu Force stack. Because they count as having allies in play already. Um, Basically, for this effect, for this card, it's going to be extremely powerful finisher for our orange energy deck. You're gonna lace your deck with allies, and you're gonna go to town and try to blast them off a few times with a focused energy, and you get to play 4 of this if you're the Ginyu Force, obviously. So this card has single-handedly kind of rebuilt the Ginyu Force into a playable MP, and it's definitely a fun deck. It's a lot different from any other orange energy deck. So if you want looking to do something a little different, something that's a little more ally focused, but has some combo-esque finishes to it. This card goes in that deck. It can also be played in any kind of deck that has multiple allies that where the allies are valuable. But that's specifically where it's intended for, and it's very strong card, and it makes that deck very playable.
Yeah, it's there are times that this hits for like 16 or something like giant. Uh, it is telegraphed because it's got transform, so your opponent can see it in your discard pile. You can see that coming from a mile away, so they can really, you know, uh, dig for and hold an energy block if they need to. But it is focused, so they've got to have a dedicated one. You get to get an ally if it goes off, which is just more fuel for the next fire of doing one of these. And something Nick didn't mention that comes really nice with this is West City, which gives you an additional 4 allies because of just the way that's what the card does. So you get kind of 8 because of your MP and that location. So that piles up really, really fast. That's already 16 off rip. So, and that's without having any actual allies on the table, which most of the Guinea Force Flash decks will do as well. But even without playing allies, you have this card and a location. It was a 2-card combo for 16. So, pretty good. This is a thing that NZ has kind of done with future sets as well. Most sets have like 1 card, at least, that is kind of like specifically for a guy or specifically for a weaker deck or archetype type to try to like catapult it into being something much more playable. In the case of Ginyu Force as a stack, that was never a thing that you were playing. This card has made it a deck. And we have Orange Awakening Drill. If this is in your discard pile when you advance or lose a personality level, you may place it into play. That's very welcome for Orange. When or once per combat, after making a successful attack, place the bottom card of your discard pile under this drill. At the beginning of your turn, you may remove this card from the game to add the cards under it to your hand. You can have a maximum of 3 cards under this drill. So, Orange is great at being the sort of drill stasis monolith of a deck that we all know as an issue. It is, however, much less effective at being like a physical attack deck or an energy attack deck. It doesn't draw a lot of cards. It doesn't have like a ton of huge damage output. So you're, without playing like the World Games Mastery or something to kind of extra stack some damage, you're not getting away with the Orange kind of beats package being super good. Having a drill like this, though, means that once per turn you can kind of get an extra card under here, and then you can remove it whenever you want. You don't have to wait till you get to 3. But getting to 3 means you could essentially have like a double-sized hand one combat, which might be enough to seal the game. Just giving it gives Orange card draw, quote unquote, without giving it to like the Orange Stasis deck, because that deck's definitely not playing like a bunch of attacks that it's going to want the bottom deck cards with. Maybe, I guess, if you like waited till you did an OVA turn or something and did an attack to set a card underneath your underneath this one, you could do that. You're not gonna. It's not a good enough use of your resources, but it's a thing I suppose you could do. I like the design of this being in a. It goes into a deck that's not just the Orange MBS Stasis Lock OVA deck, and that's a very welcome thing for Orange. Finding something to do with the Orange cards that's not just play that deck is a huge part of what we want to do with Orange in NZ.
So some of the cards that have been printed in sets later than this actually got a lot of use out of this card. There's, a card that lets you discard orange non-combats and play for an effect, and various things like that. There's also a mastery that lets you level up a little easier, which enables you to put this back into play. So, this card has seen an increase in play recently. And, even if you sometimes just enter, at the beginning of turn, go ahead and remove this, get 2 cards added to your hand, and you try to go for it, And it's a neat drill, and it's certainly, a different style of deck, like Derek was saying. And, it's been very useful, very neat so far. So we're to red now. So the red negation, as red does, is stops the effects of any combat used when needed. If you Tokawaza, raise your anger 2 or draw a card. Both of these effects are incredibly powerful. Not really any details needed on this card. It does what red does, and it's very, very good at it.
Negations continue to be good. A case study in design, I guess. Red Enraged Flurry. Physical combat with Transform. A physical attack doing +3 power stages of damage. Raise your anger 1. For the remainder of combat, you cannot gain anger, and during your attack or attack's phase, you may lower your anger 2 to perform a physical attack doing +3 power stages of damage. Removed from the game after use. So, this one is very specific. A lot of red decks want to um, use their anger to level. That's sort of the thing red does. But using your anger as kind of a resource is something that we have worked with as red a little bit across various NZ sets, and this was one of the first forays into that. You get an anger, which helps you kind of set up a number. The best time, obviously, to use this is at 4, or is at 3. Use this to go to 4, and then lower your anger 2, down to 0. You can't gain any anger, so you've really got to like line this up. But if you can get 9 stages out of this, or plus 9 plus whatever's on the table, that's pretty good. You've really got to be selective of when it's right to do that. So transform works really well for that opportunity. You can leave it in the discard pile to wait till you get to 3 anger, pull this off to go to 4, and then take your next 2 actions, just hit them 2 more times. But you've got to be sure that that's what you're doing and not using your anger for leveling or something else like that. It just makes you think a little bit differently about how you're building your red deck.
Yeah, I tend to see this card a lot in pulverized decks. Pulverized decks are very drill heavy. They don't really want to level. This card is a good way to use the anger in a deck where you don't want to level in order to get back down to 0 anger and keep your drills in play. Plus, if you're able to get 1 extra attack or even especially 2 extra attacks on with all your drills in play, could add up to a lot of damage real fast. The next card is a Red Frustration. It is a combat card. For the remainder of combat, your opponent's attacks deal +2 life cards of damage and gain, if successful, raise your opponent's anger 1 level. You can only play 1 Red Frustration a turn. So for this card, obviously, powering up your opponent's attacks is a little awkward, but this is an MPPV card mainly. It's a card where when you really want to level, if you're willing to let your opponent hit you and take some damage, you can get your anger up pretty quickly. If you can lead on this in combat and your opponent hits you a few times, then or maybe the threat of it stops them from attacking you as much. So there are times when this could feel really good, and a lot of times your opponent might just do a lot of passing. So maybe you get to survive another combat because your opponent didn't want to raise your anger more. So there are some times where this can feel pretty valuable overall, but it's definitely more for a committed anger deck.
Yeah, this card was at one point in its life wildly better than it is. It had received an errata early on in its life to what it is now, which has definitely made its usage more niche. But like Nick said, if you're a deck that wants to level, just tempting your opponent to be like, "What, you're going to attack me?" I mean, that's what you're going to do anyway. We're in combat. It just helps me win, so go for it. It's just a nice little taunt that way. You've got to be, brave to run it and pull it off, but you hit 2-3 times and get, most of a level worth of free anger out of it, in addition to whatever your own cards is doing. In red, you're probably getting anger off of those. This can add up quite fast. Red Destruction Blast is a focused energy attack. Raises your anger 1 level, then shuffles the top 2 red style cards in your discard pile into your life deck. If your anger is 3 or higher, you may place an energy combat from among those cards into your hand, removed from the game after use. So, focus energy is good. Focused energies are always good. We keep saying that. Raise your anger 1 is naturally on most red cards that see any kind of play at all. Getting to 3 anger means you have to use this on 2, so that's easy enough to do. And then getting 2 red cards back into your life deck is nice, and one of them, if it's energy combat, back into your hand to kind of extend that turn out is good. As the game continues to progress and decks get more complicated and stuff, action economy just keeps getting more and more important, and so this helps with that. Focused, like a red energy, like committed deck, obviously will make the most use out of this card. It's hard to pull this off to have the top 2 of your red cards have an energy combat in it if you're like some kind of hybrid style deck. But if you're very red energy heavy, this works great.
It also works great in the MPPV shell, just because if you ever get a card back from it, it feels like a win. I have noticed through playing this card that with all the energy anger red gains, it is actually pretty easy to set it up. And as Derek mentioned, card economy, red is really bad at card economy. It's really bad at drawing cards. It's really bad at things like that. So trying to set this up is worth it. in most decks that play it. Most turns you'll play it. All right, so we are to Saiyan. This is Saiyan Negation. This is the weakest of the Negation bunch, and it's still very good. So stop the effects of any combat card, use when needed. If you declare Tokuwaza, your Saiyan style attack still +2 stages for the rest of combat, and your opponent's personalities lose 2 stages. So important notes here, it says all opponents' personalities, so allies included, and it also says lose 2 stages, not to a minimum of 0. Therefore, if they're at 0, they're just taking life cards damage from this. So this card does value from being Saiyan because Saiyan usually has a lot of attacks. So pump effects are usually pretty good in Saiyan because they're going to throw a lot of attacks. The losing power stages is good in any kind of aggressive deck, which most Saiyan decks are aggressive. So it does the Saiyan stuff. It's a little less powerful than the other styles, but like again, it's a negation. If you're going to play Saiyan, you put this card in your deck.
Yeah. No continued explanation really needed for negations. But like he said, the damage buff is good. Plenty of times Saiyan has a bunch of extra actions left to do after pulling one of these off and getting 2, 3, or 2, 4, 6, whatever extra stages of the damage out of it. Pretty welcome. The Saiyan Dual Rushdown is a physical combat, physical attack doing +2 power stages of damage. If successful, draw a card. If you have at least one ally in play, this card performs another physical doing +3 power stages of damage immediately after the first one, using one of your allies' power rating instead. Remove the game after use. So, first attack +2 power stages. That's not very big, but if it hits, it draws you a card. So the nice kind of balance with that is, is your opponent going to block a +2 stage attack? Who knows? You might get a draw card off of that. But you then immediately, even if you just get to do another attack with one of your allies. A nice thing to note is that it doesn't say that you have to do this yourself first. So you could use an ally first and then another ally, or even the same ally, use their power rating both times, which is good. If you're at 0, use one of your allies, better power rating than your own. That's welcome. This works really well with decks that kind of have a guaranteed ally. Works obviously really good with Cell because he's got the Cell Juniors all the time. It works great in Turles, who's really good at getting out the Crusher Core. It works great in Future Gohan, who you'll see in a later set has a Trunks that is basically around from the beginning of the game and forever. So there's just good decks that kind of make use of this without having to try very hard. And then if you are playing some more kind of obscure Saiyan ally deck, this just fits into a nice 2. Action economy is good. Saiyan is already pretty good at it, and you get 2 attacks out of this, and sometimes maybe 3. Super, super good card.
Yeah, so with Saiyan having huge hands, just the ability to draw a card on if successfuls are very strong. The decks, as we mentioned, Saiyan Go just Rapid Fire previously and Saiyan Triple Blast. Saiyan likes to draw cards, so any attack that can draw a card is going to be valuable in Saiyan decks. So to continue on with the kind of ally help package here, this is Saiyan Teamwork Blast. It has Transform. It's Saiyan Heritage only. So this is an energy attack doing 3 life cards. If you have at least one ally in play, this attack stays in play, will be used one more time in this combat. If it's performed by an ally, it does an additional +4 removed from game. So just on its face value, energy for 3. With no allies in play, obviously that's going to be a pretty weak card. Now, with it having Transform, it can sit in the discard pile until the time comes when you do have an ally in play. And notably, obviously what you want to do with this card is you want to get to 0 or 1 above and let your ally throw it both times, because 2 energies for 7 is very, very good. So, if your ally can take control of combat to use this, and energy for 7 is good enough on its shell. Obviously, if you get 2 uses out of it, it's great. If you can get 1 use at 3 and 1 use at 7, that's still pretty good. So, Saiyan energy-based decks are going to like this card. You just have to have enough consistency with your allies to make this card valuable, because if you don't play allies, or if you just have one ally that you have no real way to get a hold of, this being an energy for 3 one time is not going to be something you're really interested in doing. Now, one last thing to note, it is Saiyan Heritage only. So that means in order for your ally to get the full benefit, they do have to be Saiyan Heritage.
Good catch. That was the thing I was going to say. Yeah, this attack is another one of those that piles up for more economy, which is good. Uh, Getting 14 out of it is awesome. Getting 10 out of it's pretty good. Getting 3 out of it, not very good. So you've got to line that up nice. But if you've got a deck that can make use of it, it's a powerful addition to your list. And then we've got Saiyan Surprise Support. Combat card. Use immediately after taking damage from an attack. You may place an ally from your hand or discard pile into play at 4 power stages above 0. Choose an ally you control. That ally can gain control of combat this turn, regardless of your MP's power stage. Draw a card. Remove from game after use. So this card just immediately replaces itself, which is good. Gets you an ally if you've got one in hand or discard, meaning you don't have to just kind of clutch one. But it's nice too if you drew one, like if you got entered on and got an ally in hand, which one of the things that can happen with like a big ally-based deck is you just draw dead cards. So this kind of lets you turn one of those dead in-hand allies into something you can actually use, and it can take control of combat even if you're not at 0. Just a powerful card. It's been recently kind of upped to this level, and I think it just is I actually think this one is a little bit underplayed if you're playing a Saiyan ally strategy. This card is awesome.
Yeah, one important thing to note here is that this card can always be played to draw a card even if you don't have any allies or even if you have nothing else going on. So like the low end of this is your opponent hits you with an attack and you draw a card. And obviously that's not something that feels great necessarily, but it is a use when needed effect, so it doesn't take up your turn. And if there's no allies in your discard pile or in your hand, and you got entered on and drew this, you can just cycle it, and that gives it a nice floor, so that it's much easier to play in decks that maybe only have a couple of allies. Maybe it's a fusion deck or a deck that only has a couple of specific allies. You can still get value out of this card.
Yep. That is it for the styled cards in NZ3 transformation. We are going to cover the freestyle cards and personality cards in part 2 of this video, so it just doesn't run on for eternity. So hopefully you made it this far. If you did, let us know what cards you like, and come join us for part 2 of Set 3's review. See you next time.